Hello, class. I want to go over how to use Python with script files. In our first lesson, we looked at an introduction to Python, expressions and variables, types, especially integers and strings, the fact that Python is both a dynamically and a strongly typed language, but we did that within the context of Python's interactive shell. So now we're going to create a Python script file and run it, much like you'll do for the rest of the course and in your first lab. So what I've done is I've preloaded a Explorer window, and I'm just going to create a new folder here called test. And we're going to open this up in Visual Studio Code. Once code is loaded up, let's create a new file in our test folder, and we'll call it mat.py. So we have our Python file here, and in the idle editor and interactive shell, we were typing in entries line by line. Most of the time, you're going to write Python scripts in a .py file that represents the first couple letters of Python. And you can have multiple lines in here. We'll talk about flow control and functions and classes. These are fully fledged programs. Oftentimes you'll see in large projects hundreds of Python files, all linked together, all importing each other. But right now we're just going to talk about the basics. So in a Python file, much like in other languages, a lot of times you'll start with a comment. Comments in Python are a # or a hashtag. So this is a comment, and anything with a comment will not be executed. If you want to do multi-line comments in Python, you're going to have to put hashtags on every line. And if we want to declare a variable, for instance, in our previous video, we declared a variable called spam, and then we declared a variable called eggs. We had to do those on different entries in the interactive shell. So we would declare something, hit enter, declare something, hit enter. In a Python file, you can do it all in one file. So here, if we do spam equals 42 and eggs equals 24, we've declared two integer variables, one called spam, one called eggs, and equal to 24 for eggs and 42 for spam. So we've done that in 3 lines in a single file. We can do that with strings as well. We'll talk about that in a moment. If we want to display to the screen in Python, we can use the print method, and in it, if we just want to display spam, for instance, we can write print spam. We can do print spam plus eggs, print eggs, whatever you want. As you see in Visual Studio Code, it gives you some IntelliSense. It allows you to talk about the various parameters that you can put into each of these methods. So the print function, again, is going to print to the console. So let's just print spam right now, and let's save this file. And so we have a Python file. What do we do with it? Well, we're going to open up the command prompt. So I will open up a command prompt here and navigate to my code test. So I am in my code test directory, and we can see that I have a file, mat.py. So how do you run a Python file? Well, you run a Python file first by typing the word Python. That calls python.exe, and it's based on the fact that the directory where python.exe is located is in your system path variable. So the system looks for, hey, what's called Python, and it checks the Python directory and finds it. So you type the word Python and you put a space, and after it you type the name of the file. If you're already in the directory, it could be just the file name. If you're not in the same directory, you'll have to put the fully qualified path. But in this case, we will just type mat.py and hit enter, and on the screen is 42. So we've executed multiple lines of Python all using one file. So going back to our code, we printed spam. We could print spam plus eggs, save this, run back, to the command prompt, run it again, and you get 66. We could make these strings. So spam is spam, and egg is eggs, eggs is eggs. And we're going to concatenate that string instead. So spam plus eggs now concatenates the string spam and eggs. And if we save this file and run it again, we will see would help if my command prompt window was a little higher. Spam eggs. So 2 concatenated strings. So again, this is kind of going over what we did in the idle console, but this is really about how we're going to handle it in a single file. So we can do multiple lines. In your lab for this week, you're going to write multiple lines to the file that you're going to create. So you're going to follow the same approach I did here, using the template that I've posted to GitHub Classroom. In it, I've pre-entered some comments for you to follow. So that's for the lab. In Python, if we want to accept user input, we can do so using the input method. Now, this is for Python 3, and we're working out of Python 3 in these videos. In previous versions of Python, the input method you would use is raw underscore input. But again, if you're submitting code for this class, it needs to be in Python 3. So right now I'm working out of Python 3.8.1, but the input class would be valid for that. So let's say I don't have any information on what spam is. We're going to ask the user. Input is the method, and we're going to ask the user to input what is spam. And after that, we're going to repeat back to the screen what the user inputted. So we'll use print. Spam is, and we'll concatenate it with what the user entered. And we will just save this file and open up our command prompt again. I'm going to clear it off and run mat.py. What is spam? The best. Oh, spam is the best. Spam, spam, spam. So again, just a simple way to grab input from a user, and we're going to print it out to the screen. We talked about in the previous lesson that little trick about types and how you cannot add a string and an int together. So if we had spam as 42 and eggs equals 24 and dinner equals spam plus eggs, and we wanted to output that to the screen, print dinner. When we save this, Python's going to raise a type error here. When we were using the idle interactive shell, the type error would display directly in the interactive shell. Now, if we run this file in the command prompt, we'll see a little more information than we had in the interactive shell. So here we see a traceback. So a traceback is the most recent call, and this is where we're going to go and find our error. So in the file mat.py that we called, it says in line 4, the line dinner equals spam plus eggs, that expression raised a type error. We can only concatenate 2 strings, not an integer in a string. So we can add 2 integers, we can concatenate 2 strings, but if we have different types, we have to explicitly convert them. The great thing about running in the command line is you get line information specifically that points back to your file. So here it says line 4, so we'll go back to our file, and we see on line 4, dinner equals spam plus eggs. Here's the problem. So we can go and either convert both of these to strings, both these to integers. Let's just convert spam to an integer. So we'll add these 2 numbers together. So if you remember, the explicit type conversion for an integer is int, and we're going to make spam an integer. So it'll now be 42 plus 24 equals 66. If we save this file and run the command prompt, run it again, we get 66 and no exception, no error was raised. So everything is all good. So again, remember when you're running in the console, use these errors and exceptions to your advantage. Look at the line, the stack trace, the most recent call. In that stack trace will guide you to your problem. So that's it. Again, this week, the meat of this was in the previous lesson and in the reading for this week, Chapter 1, Python Basics of the Automate book. Again, one of the prerequisites for the course was you had a programming background. So this first week was really getting it all set up, playing with Python just a little bit. And we're going to see, especially next week, Python is a little strange, probably from what you're used to. In C Sharp, in Java, and C++, blocks are defined using the good old squiggly bracket. But in Python, it's based on spacing of lines and spacing that prepends text. So while the concepts and the logic in Python are going to be very similar and make sense to you in the upcoming weeks, and hopefully this made sense to you as well, you're going to have to learn some nuanced difference between Python and other languages. It's not to say Python isn't as equally as powerful as the other languages, but it's important to note the difference, be able to handle them, and be able to adapt between languages and adapt especially as we're using Python. I will talk to you in the next lecture. Thanks.